when you have an impression or a feeling about something, after that initial feeling, do you have the impulse control to actually see why you're feeling that way? For me, it's when I feel frustrated, when I'm like, oh, right? I'm so frustrated with something. But can I make space to actually step back and look at it? This is what we are talking about this week. We are in week 37 of our Handbook for New Stoics. My name is Sierra, and I am joined by Amy and Rob. And this was just loaded, chock block full of information this week. So what we're talking about, the title is Catch and Examine the Judgments Underlying Your Impressions and Impulses. That's a mouthful.
That's a
so it is. Last week, we were talking about catching the impression, right? So for me, when I felt that frustration with something, I'm going to actually catch myself and say, do I really need to be frustrated about this? But this week, we are stepping even further back, and we're asking a couple of questions. Is your impulse proportionate to the issue at hand, right? Are you blowing it out of proportion? Second, is this pro-social, which means, is this acceptable? Is your impulse in how to react, is that an acceptable way to react? Is screaming at somebody over a towel acceptable? I have to step back and say, no, it's not. And the third is subject to reservation, keeping your serenity in mind. In other words, is it really worth me losing my stuff over a towel? Let's discuss. Rob, Amy, tell me what you think about all this information we got here.
Well, this one was a doozy, as you said, Sierra. It was not only chock full of stuff we had to think about, but it was also a long lesson in the concepts that were introduced. You know, this is our second lesson in our final section of this 52-week program that we're embarking on, this 52-week journey. And this is all about ascent. This was a big one. I think I had to reread it a couple times really to get through what it is that they wanted us to really think about. You know, they talk in the example here, they use Ticanio as an example. And in Ticanio's situation, he continually gets frustrated when he has to wait at the doctor's office.
Who doesn't?
I know. And because of that, he has an immediate impression and an impulse to react in a specific way. But it's forcing him and us to think about, okay, well, why am I thinking this way? You know, last week was focused on, is this or is this not within my control? But this is taking that step further. Why am I having this immediate annoyance with, for example, the doctor's office? And it's a tough one because you've got to dig a little bit deeper. I know, Rob, in your program, Master Your Message, you introduce a very similar concept to this, but even take it a step further where you are recognizing what is happening and then trying to figure out why exactly it's happening that way, or why your thoughts are steering you in that particular direction. So I thought this tied really deeply into what you're doing with your program, which that exercise is extremely valuable and helpful, but it does require a little bit of heavy lifting on your part.
You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. And that's the reality of this exercise. That's the reality of the exercise that we have in Master Your Message. It is just that. I mean, this is the step to become a true Stoic. It's almost going back to Albert Einstein's quote of question everything. Question everything about yourself. Question everything about what you think and what your impressions are, what your judgments are, because they're automatic. And you have to create enough space between your automatic and your response. I mean, this is what Viktor Frankl talked about in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's called logotherapy, essentially, is that giving yourself enough space to be able to examine what's going on here. And that's why I liked this one, because oftentimes we have impressions on, you know, you like to say should all over yourself.
Shoulds. I got the shoulds.
This should be this way. I shouldn't have to wait at the doctor's office this long. But that's the reality. Anyone who goes to the doctor knows you're going to wait there for an hour. Just the way it is. Whether it's right or wrong is indifferent, because you just got to be prepared before you go in rather than act on impulse. And this is designed to get you not to act on your impulse, because acting on impulse, and that's where the 3 Ps that Sierra talked about come in. Is it proportionate? So you're waiting at the doctor's office. Okay, so is everybody else. So you're going to blow up at the office staff who can't control what the doctor's schedule is going to be. What if someone in the other room needed extra help because they had extra questions? Isn't that better for them to get those answers or the extra time with the doctor? Okay, maybe so. Is it pro-social? This is the important part too. This really comes down to kindness. Rather than being a jerk, can you be kind? And if you are really concerned about waiting so long, be like, hey, I'm just curious to know how long the doctor's going to be because I have another appointment that I need to get to in half an hour.
Mhm.
You know, something along those lines. And then the properly reserved is the same kind of thing. Is it better to treat it? Because you can still say meaningful things in a calm way. You don't have to get overexcited. You don't have to yell. You can deliver an important message in a calm way. And that is what they want you to run it through, these filters of these 3 Ps, which I think are extremely helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
You know, and I think too that third one is that moderation, right? Like, is it good for you to allow this to upset you this much? And a lot of times, do you choose the serenity or do you choose the impulse? And sometimes you have to pick because you can't listen to every impulse, or that wouldn't be in moderation. That wouldn't be living in moderation, which is the Stoic way.
And I think to that point as well, when it's thinking about choosing the serenity, one of the lessons that we talked about way back, I think it was maybe even in like week 2 or 3, was the idea of desire and aversion, and really focusing on desiring that which is in your control. So often when it comes to that serenity, we are giving up our serenity to externals that are not within our control. So like, for example, with me and my shoulds, that is my corruption of my serenity. And when they talk about reservation, it's also employing something that we talked about recently, which is the reserve clause, which is, you know, again, it's the fate permitting or God willing, or if all things go the way I think they should, adding that clause to catch yourself, to remind yourself that just because you want it to be this way. So for example, with the doctor's appointment, okay, you know, my appointment's at 12:30, so I should be done by 1, time and circumstance
Doctor's
permitting.
schedule permitting.
Doctor's schedule, patient need permitting. Adding that clause to it can help you better temper or find that serenity that otherwise you would be like, why am I still here? But also at the same time, being realistic that what has history taught you? What has history told you about doctor's appointments? Always add a buffer.
Well, and then what can you do to counter that? Can you bring a book? Can you bring a journal? What can you do in that time while you're sitting in either the waiting room or in the exam room? What can you do while you're in there? Because I like to bring a little reading material because I know it's going to be late. So I'm just like, okay, I'll bring my tablet and I'll flip through a book and know that it's, you know, going to be
your time to catch up on your reading. I think that's a great way to think about it. You know, you talk about that idea of flipping the script, Rob, and how you can take a situation and, you know, it starts off as one thing, and after you do this examination, is there a way that you can change your view of the situation without actually changing anything within the situation? And then also, Sierra, for you, you know, you have a lot of great tools in your radical mindfulness program, just about how to find that calm, how to just chill out a little bit when you start to feel that exasperation start to bubble up in you. How can you, it's not tamping it down, it's really like extinguishing it, but extinguishing it in a healthy way so that it doesn't make you full of rage and ready to snap at the next person that you encounter.
That's kind of what I think Stoicism ultimately comes down to, but it's
chill the F out.
Well, it's putting yourself in control. So you're the driver, not the passenger in life. So no matter what the situation is, with the tools that Sierra has in her radical mindfulness class, with the tools that I can give you in Master Your Message, and the tools that Amy's going to give you in Teamwork, that's what it is. It's be a driver in life, not a passenger. And when I mean that in so many different metaphorical ways, but with your emotions and with your automatic thoughts, if those control you, you're a passenger. If you take control of them and know that they're there, but they don't really necessarily mean anything, they don't mean that they're right, you become the driver. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes you need those automatic thoughts to survive. It's an absolute, that's why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
But human beings have evolved so much since these guys wrote these amazing words with automobiles and internet and every other technological advancement we've had in the 4,000 or whatever years since Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius were thinking about these things and pondering these things. There's so much more that our brains are still stuck in that timeline, and it's so easy to give in to those and react in a certain way. But if you can just like, okay, unless you're in a life or death situation, just trust it and go, or fight, or whatever you need to do. But if you're not, most of the time you're not, take a pause.
Well,
be in control.
They even talk about in this chapter about, in a sense, having the keys to your own ignition. Takayo says, I could just leave. I don't have to stay here for the appointment. I could just walk out and just leave the appointment, right? That's definitely being in the driver's seat. You can either deal with it and wait, or you can choose to leave. Like, it's your choice. You're a grown up.
Find a doctor who will respect your time a little differently. Sure.
Or allow for more time for that situation. Again, there's so many ways you can think about it. And I think the key is that these automatic negative thoughts, they are automatic. You're never going to be able to shed those. They're programmed in you for a reason. But the big thing is being able to then, to Rob, to your point, take that pause. They even say right here on 221, a person can choose to agree with the thoughts, they can reject them, or they can suspend any type of judgment. So it's ultimately up to you how you choose to respond or deal with that automatic thought. That can be what drives you. It can be what causes you to pause, or it can be what causes you to completely rethink the situation that you're in.
That's what being on the porch is all about, a place to examine these types of things and share these ideas, which is where Stoicism was founded, which is why we are Painted Porch Strategies.
It's our weekly porch ponderings.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right.
Ponderings from the porch.
But I love this because this is like advanced level Stoicism. So you have chapters 1, chapter 2, you have intro, and you have whatever the median level is. Now we're in AP, we're in advanced placement Stoicism.
Are we going to get college credit for this?
We should get honors college credit for this. But I mean, this is the difference between most people won't do this work. So if you're watching this and you're watching us discuss this, you're doing what most people aren't willing to do. I believe that this is my impression of success. And again, it's only my belief. You can have a completely different one, and that's totally fine. My definition of success is when you as a human being kind of figure out where you're at in life and figure out that you're not subject to our evolutionary signals, that's evolving as a life form from moment of birth to however old you are at this moment. You could be 85 watching this. If you figure that out, that's success. I mean, that's amazing in and of itself, because I've been listening to a lot of people, a lot of these great thinkers, and they think about, if you can get to the place where you don't have any wants or needs, like, all right, I want a bigger house. I need to be a bigger house. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. You are in control. Because if you are comfortable, if you are almost in a state of constant joy as often as possible, that is success. Or if you're comfortable with your surroundings and the people you're around, or you need to change that or whatever, that's success. It's not about houses and cars. It's about being as close to joy as possible in the most moments possible.
Finding that serenity, to your point, Sierra.
Because let me give you one more thought, because I've been thinking a lot about this. But just think about the miracle that it is.
He's on a kick.
This is the part of Stoicism that really is awakening my brain. And this is the part where all of our teamwork together as Painted Porch Strategies, which we want to work with you on, all comes together at this kind of level. Like if you do this kind of work, you're going to be in a great position for yourself. But think about the miracle that is life. Think about the universe as a whole, how vast it is. But
that's a big thing to think about, Rob.
But think about, what are the chances that you are alive as a human being? What are the odds, universally speaking, that somehow, somewhere, something hit the earth and created all this life. And here we are, thousands and thousands and millions of years as a life form that has a brain that allows you to think. What are the chances that in the vast scheme of we are literally the only known life form that we know of? That's a miracle. It is a miracle to be in this position as a human being. Let's take advantage of it. Let's treat each other like we're all miracles, because we are, when you think about it. Okay, I'm done. My philosophy out. Book closed. Good job on this one.
So Sierra, proceed. There were some exercises that they had us do in this one.
I honestly am not quite sure how I can follow that act, but well, I was going to say that they do that to tie a bow around of this. They say, if your impulse doesn't conform to all three P's, proportionate, pro-social, and properly reserved, correct it so that it does. So after you examine this impression, right, and you go through the three P's and it does not conform to those three P's, perhaps it's time to change your impression into something else. In other words, perhaps it's time to change your mind. If you look at all these and it's not correct, perhaps you need to correct your impression, which means the way that you view something. And if that isn't a great way to kind of zoom out, just sort of like we just zoomed out on the Big Bang Theory somehow, not somehow, some way, but I like the journey, is perhaps you need to correct your thinking. And this is what I love about Stoicism, is it always asks us to question, and we are never full, done, complete, perfect. We are always a work in progress.
So for part of that lesson as going through the three P's and then assessing, did you get all three, or are you kind of half and half? They asked you to maybe come up with a couple questions for you to examine yourself, to identify, okay, so I didn't meet the three P's. Why?
And that's okay.
But having a couple of those questions. So did you have a particular question that popped out to you as part of your examination, so that you can, remember to examine yourself with these three P's?
I ask myself this: is my impression, is my impulse kind? And if it's not, what can I do to make it so? Because we all have a protective meanness in us, is what I will say, where, at least for me, my automatic reaction is like, ugh. Like, for example, the other day, I have an interaction with this guy on Twitter sometimes, and we disagree on things, and that's kind of what it is. I like it because it forces me to wish this person kindness. And I have to think about it that way. And it's not always easy, because my tendency is to be like, haha, I'm right, you're wrong. Because I have that tendency to want to be right. Why? What does right being mean? It forces me to challenge all those things. So is my impulse kind?
How about you, Sierra? What was a check yourself?
Before you
My check myself
is yourself before you wreck yourself. Yeah.
It is the serenity. The serenity word definitely resonated with me. If I prioritize my serenity, how does that change the scales? How does that tip the scales? What about you, Amy?
So for mine, I had a couple questions, but the one that I primarily wanted to focus on was, because for me, it's about avoidance a lot of times, or the shoulds, right? So is this to avoid something, or because I desire a certain outcome? That was kind of a question that I wanted to ask. Am I moving towards, or am I moving away from something? And that can help inform me whether or not I'm staying aligned with how I'm approaching that particular impulse and judgment. Yeah.
Lots going on in the porch.
Yeah.
Guys, I hate to break your hearts, but we are out of time for today. So we are going to wrap up, and great work. This was a lot to tackle this week, but remember that there is no end point. There is no, due date for this. This is a lifelong practice. And that is why we're constantly talking about it. We are constantly working on it. We believe that we all are works in progress. We believe that there is always room to improve and level up. So next week, we are talking about observe and counter 4 moods of the mind.
I can get pretty moody, so it kind of ties in.
No comment.
So make sure sure that you are following us. Make sure you check us out on www.paintedporchstrategies.com. If you haven't already, you can join us anytime on our book club, A Handbook for New Stoics. It is available on Amazon, I believe. So, anything's possible. Jump in anytime. For Rob, for Amy, for myself, Sierra, have a wonderful day, and remember to be kind to one another and to yourself.